Thank you. Welcome everybody to this academy about the audit trail. One short note before, as most of you, I am working from home and my neighbor decided to do some construction work today. So there might be some noise in the background. Apologies for that, can't be helped. The agenda for today. I'll start with a demo of the audit trail. This is a relatively straightforward feature. So I think the demo will probably explain most of it. I will then return to the PowerPoint and do a short recap of all the different items that you will see in the audit trail. Then we'll take questions. Please save your questions until that point, because as I said, it's a relatively straightforward feature, but it has a lot of elements. So I'm reasonably sure that you will have questions as soon as you see it, but I'm also reasonably sure that most of them will be answered during the demo or otherwise during the recap of all the elements of that audit trail. If there are any questions left, we'll take them at the end. And then we'll shortly talk about the next academy. I expect this not to be a very long session, 30 to 45 minutes. So with no further ado, let's jump into the demo. One short thing about the audit trail. What is the audit trail? The audit trail is where you can actually see the entire journey your respondent took to your survey. You will see the exact order in which questions are answered, what navigation was used to go to the next question, and how much time was spent answering each and every page. So that could be very useful for your quality control, both the quality control for your interview, but also the quality control for your survey, because that will probably also very nicely point out which part of your surveys are problematic for all of your respondents. So let's go to the demo. I will leave PowerPoint. Let's first take a very short look at a very short survey I created to show the different elements of this audit trail. Let's quickly go over this survey. It's running the Nfield Chicago. It will start with a welcome page, the standard welcome page for the Nfield Chicago template. We'll have one question, an alpha question, asking the respondent's name, which has a variable code name. We have a code question for gender. Then a number question for age. Once we have that, we have a dummy question and we recalculate the age question into age groups. Then we have 3 different questions, either for the very young, the middle-aged, or the older age people. A question, whatever you have a driver license, then we check if you have a driver license, if you indeed said if you were not younger than 18, because obviously, at least in the Netherlands, that means that you cannot have a driver's license. So in that case, we send them back to question 3, which is the age question, to reevaluate if you indeed gave the correct age. And then we have a page again to transform to some questions about Chicago. And these will probably most of you recognize as the example questions we use for the Chicago template to demo the matrix. I will have a repeat after that only runs for those people who said that they strongly disagree with the matrix statement. And then finally we end with 2 block questions. Those last are all just to show you what how a matrix question, how a repeat question, and how a block question looks in the audit trail. And then we'll end the survey. So reasonable, straightforward survey. Let's go to Nfield. Yeah. I go to the new manager. Still logged in. I am, and I will create a AP survey. I will call that Audit Academy. Create this. Let's upload. Questionnaire I just showed you, which is Academy example Q. Save that. Immediately publish this. Start fieldwork. I should not have done this in this order because there's one thing I want to change, fieldwork, and I want to synchronize paradata and closed answers automatically, because then I will receive the audit trail back without need to sync. So I publish this change. I still need to assign an interviewer. I will assign myself. So let's add a filter. First name starts with F. That should show me. And I will assign myself, sign. That's it. I have assigned myself to this survey. So I'm ready to pick up the survey. I will switch to my KP device. I need to sync this. Let's wait until it's ready with that. Okay. And there it is, the first one. So let's start an interview. There's the introduction page. Let's make the first interview pretty straightforward. So, name, I am male. That will make me middle-aged, so I get the question for the middle-aged respondents. I have a driver's license, which would be fine because I'm old enough to have a driver's license. Now we transfer into the questions coming from the Chicago template examples. We'll start with if you know any of these, and this will determine how many statements I get the matrix question. So I will do these 4. Next one, and that gives me the matrix question. This is running on a mobile phone, so it's doing the mobile view. First one, agree. I need to strongly disagree with a few of these, because that will be in the repeat. So I strongly disagreed with 2, so there should be 2 in this repeat. Lyric opera, Ripley Field, fine. And first question in block, second question in block, and that's the end of the survey. So let's take a look what the audit trail is actually reporting on this one. So minimize this. Let's take a look at the monitor, and we already have the one complete in here, the one successful. So let's download the data. Need to make sure that the paradata is turned on, because the audit log is part of this paradata. Create the download. Yeah. Activities, and there is my download. Open that one. And here is the audit log. As you can see, it's called audit log. Let's open it. It's a CSV, so it will open in Excel. And there is the interview we just did. Interview number, it's the first interview we did. As you can see, it has all the questions that has been answered. It gives the order in which these questions have been answered, the time it actually took for each of these questions, or rather page, to walk through. Then what navigation was used to get to the next page. Each question, that was the next button. We have an indication on what sort of question type this is. So the first one, that was the introduction, that is a page. And the next one are all questions. Whatever it is, a numeric code or a alpha question, that is all reported here as question type question. Then we have a new page that was actually the transfer to the Chicago part of the survey. A question, which was the multi-question, and then we actually have the matrix, which is reported not as a question, but as a matrix. And as you can see, that is only reported once, although there are several statements, because as I said, it's not as much a time node of a question, but of the actual page, and a page can contain multiple questions if, for example, that is a matrix. So you will only see then the question that is reported here, the question ID, is the last question on that page. So in this particular case, that was the 7th statement. For question Q11, that was the last statement on that page. So that one is reported. And from the question type, you can determine, okay, this was a matrix question. Next are the repeats, which again are questions, because these are codes questions on a single page. You can see that it is a repeat because in the question ID, we have the R in front of it. These repeats are running in random order. And one of the nice things about the audit trail that you can also actually see the random order. You can see that the 9th repeat has run first and the 5th repeat has run second. We only had 2 because there were only 2 statements in the matrix with which we disagreed strongly. And then finally, we have the block question. Those had 2 questions, but as I said previously, we report per page, not per question. So again, you can see that this was a block because the question type is block. And the question reported here is the last question in that block, which is Q14. And then we have the last thank you question, which was not a page, but actually a question, because we want to be able to jump to that. So that again is reported as a question. This is the variable name. So those questions where we actually use the var are also reporting the question variable name. And this is the actual timestamp. And this is the timestamp when the question was submitted. So it's the timestamp when this button was pressed. Time is in UTC. Okay, let's go back. Let's close this one. Don't save, and let's make a slightly more interesting interview. So we'll do start interview. Again, name, gender. We'll say again 55, and this time we'll get the question for middle respondents, but I will not continue. I actually go back and I will change my answer to 15. And now I get the question for young respondents, and from this point onwards, I do not have a driver's license. I answer the questions again. I will again disagree with 2 of them. So I will get 2 questions in the repeat. And the block question. And that is the end of this survey. So let's take a look how this looks like in the audit trail. So let's check. Is it already there? Yep, 2 successful. So I can create a new download. There it is. Download a new one. Open the audit log. And if your second interview, there, from this point onward, this is the second interview. One difference we had in the second interview that we actually used the back button. And there you see that this respondent, as you saw, pushed the back button. So we can see it came from Q3 at Q6, the back button was pushed. So it's returning to Q3 and we can actually see, hey, this respondent changed his answer because the next question he gets is a different question. It's not Q6, it's Q5. So we can now actually know, okay, this respondent went back and actually changed the answer, which could be okay, could be suspicious depending on what sort of question this is. So this is how you would recognize a back button and how you could determine what a respondent actually did. Okay. And let's do the third and last one here. Let's start an interview. And this time, we'll again go back, but we let the script do this. So again, name. I will immediately say that this is 15. So I get the questions for young respondents. Do you have a driver license? I will say yes. And according to the logic, that means you can't be 15. If you have a driver's license, you can't be 15. So we're being sent back to the question of the 8th question. I will correct that into 25. I will get the questions for middle respondents now. And yes, I have a driver's license. Script is fine with this one. I will only now say I know one thing only. And I agree with this one, so I do not get the repeat questions because I am not strongly disagreeing with anything. First question in block. Yeah, thank you. Okay. Now let's check if this one is synced. Yes, it is. We have 3. So download the data, create download again. There it is. And this time we should have a 3rd respondent in our audit log. There he is. And as you can see, they're all next buttons because this respondent went back, but it was the script that sent this respondent back. So that respondent actually pushed the next button. We can still see that he went back because there's Q3 here, which is the 8th question. Then we have a few next questions. And then finally at this question, that was the time, this can't be right. And the script sent them back to Q3. And then indeed, this respondent made a correction at this question and then proceed to a different route. Okay, so far the demo. Let's return to the script. One short recap of the different items we saw in that audit log. So we'll start with the interview number, which is the first item in that audit log. This is what actually connects this audit log with the rest of the data. That interview number is also in the closed answer file, it's in the open answer file, it's in the para data, and it's in a sample table once this will be in online. So this is how you connect the audit log with the rest of the data. And the sequential order is the order in which the questions were answered by this particular respondent. It starts with 1, it is raised with 1 for each page shown. The order is specific for the interview. So if you have a different routing, your first question might actually be different than for other respondents. So that something is in sequential order 5 does not necessarily mean that that is the same answer, that is the same question for each of your interviewers. That depends on the routing of your questionnaire. Question ID is the next one. This actually locks us up with your survey. That is either the question Odin, it is either the Odin question number, which you can recognize because it is proceed with a Q by then. It's the page, which you can recognize because it's a pay. A page does not have a ID configured in the script, so the ID is assigned when publishing this survey. So for all of the audit trail, that page will have the same ID. Repeats, as you can see here, R's, those determine repeats. Depending, you also have to take a look at the question to know for sure whatever this is a question, a matrix, or indeed a repeat, because a matrix will also have that R in front of it. And one thing we did not saw in the examples is the subroutines. A subroutine you can recognize because it is preceded with an S. You need to have that preceded with an S because you can call on a subroutine multiple times. First time it is called in the script, it will be S1. The second time it will be S2, etc., etc. This is the order in the actual script. So not the order in which a respondent goes to that subroutine. S3 means this is the third call of the subroutine in the script. For this particular respondent, it could be the first call of that subroutine. Question variable. Now, pretty straightforward. That is the if you use the star var in your script to give your question, to give your Odin question a name, this is where you will see this. It is empty if you do not use star var in your script. Question type. You see that is either a question, and if it is a question, it is either a alpha question, a number question, a code, an open, or a form. It could be page, it could be matrix or block. And in case it's matrix or block, the question ID is referring to the last item that was shown to the respondent. Elapsed time, it's the time in seconds the question page was shown to the respondent. Again, important question page, not necessarily a question. If that was a block, a worm, or a matrix, those were multiple questions. Navigation action, that is what the respondent actually did to move to the next page. So options are next, in which case he pushed the next button, back, or suspend. If your respondent chooses suspend, it will be noted as suspend. If he resumes the survey, the audit trail will simply continue. from that point onwards. Action date time, that is the date and time the page was submitted. So it's the date and time when actually the question, so when the action was done, so when the next back or the pause button was pushed, the time is UTC, universal time. Beware. The audit trail only works for surveys created after this feature has been turned on your domain. So it will not work for surveys that you have already created now. It will not work for surveys that were created before this has been turned on. App version required is 2.1. Will probably work on 2.02, but not all that I showed will work there. So keep in mind, your app version should be 2.1 to make sure that everything that I just show you would actually be in that audit trail. Total interview time will be longer than the sum of the audit trail. I know some of your customers love to check on computers and actually start comparing all those time. The total interviewer time as reported in the U file is longer because that is not a sum of all the questions. That also contains all the processing that took place between those questions, which the audit trail does not take into account. So the total time will be slightly longer. We run a test on a very complicated survey. It was not much longer. It was still in that survey, it was only a few seconds. Only Katie for now. Online will follow probably in June. We're very confident it will be June, but you never know. Okay. Any questions?
Yes, there were a couple of questions. Let's deal with them as in the order as they came in. The first question was for dropped out or screened out respondents. Would the log show the last question that they answered?
The last question where they actually did an action on, yeah. So the last question, so if they drop out, let's say on question 10 and the previous question was question 9, it will show question 9. Okay, unless they very explicitly click on pause on question 10, then it will show question 10.
Okay.
So
next question
will show so it will show the last question that was submitted. That is the correct formulation. Yeah.
Yeah, well, there was also a question on whether it would work for Nfield Online, but that's due in June. You said in terms of app version, you need 2.1 preferably, but are there any minimum device requirements for this feature to work?
No, no, no. It should work on all devices that run 2.1.
Okay. Another question was, am I able to find out what exactly the respondent filled in the answer that has been changed? For example, the respondent filled in something, then push the back button and change the answer.
No, no, no. We only store those answers that were actually that the respondent actually wants you to see. Because there would be privacy problems when the respondent actually changes answers, because in that moment he withdrew his permission. He shared that answer. That is a legal way of looking at that. So no, we are not storing that.
But technically, it's not a respondent, but the interviewer that submits the answer, right? Okay.
Yeah.
And there is some concern about how this feature will impact the upload time, since there is quite a lot of data to transfer, especially for longer and more complex surveys.
Yeah, it will add to the time. This is of course zip, so it will not be a very big file. When you synchronize this, yeah, but it will add, yeah.
Okay.
But not by much. As you can see, I have auto on, and it was there almost instantly.
So that's has to be a bit of trial and error for the customers to find out. Okay. There's a change request. Can this audit trail have an option to show a respondent or respondents in a flow, so it's visually easier to see how they navigated through the survey?
How? Yeah, you have all the data to make that possible.
So this flow chart is something that would be that would need to be created taking the CSV file as the input, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Okay. Would the audit trail work on projects created in the old, the classic Nfield Manager?
Yeah. They work on all surveys that will be created after this feature has been turned on for your domain. So whatever they are in the online or whatever they are in the classic manager or in the new manager, that doesn't matter. I use the new manager because I want to familiarize people also with that interface and not show it in an interface that will be outdated in a couple of months.
Perfect. For old projects, does it work if we republish the project?
No. Now, a separate database needs to be created, and that only happens when you actually create that survey.
Apart from the online update, which is coming next, can we see the answer that has been changed? Is that in the development plan or something else?
No. That's not in the development plans. And as I said previously, there are legal issues with that. Because that respondent more or less withdrew his permission for you to submit that answer.
Still some questions coming in. Is there any setup needed for this feature once it is turned on in the domain?
No. That feature will that will work as soon as it is turned on in your domain. You don't need to do anything to make that work.
That is something that we do, right? The DA, domain administrator, does not have to do anything, right?
No.
Okay, a final question that came in. In order to save upload time, do we have an option to disable the audit trail for projects that are selected?
No, you cannot disable it. If that really becomes a problem, that is a feature we can take into account. But for this moment, I do not expect, to be honest, this will weigh very heavy on these projects. Again, this is SIP. What weighs heavy on your syncing, that are the recordings you make, and that are the media files, the pictures you take. I don't think that this will impact significantly. If it does, this is a feature we will certainly take into consideration by then, that to actually be able to turn it off.
Okay, perfect. Those are all the questions for now.
Okay. And I'm going to the final remarks. If there are any questions, just type them in now, and we will make one last call after the final remarks. Next Academy session. The next Academy session will be about quota. This was a relatively short one, 45 minutes, I expect. We will make up for that in the next Academy session, because that will be a long one. We will talk about all the quota features that have been implemented over the last months So the min and the max quota, the least field quota, and the two that are currently in beta, which is the max overshoot and changing quota frame after start of field work. I have these academies now planned for the 23rd and the 24th of June. That is depending on whatever they are out of beta at that point. I expect they are, but again, things can happen, so it might be 2 weeks later. In that case, I will also move the academies 2 weeks later. Invitations will be sent in 1 or 2 weeks. Yes. The audit trail will be turned on for your domain next week. I will check later today when that exactly will be. Recording of the session will be available later this week. We have a second Academy session tomorrow. We will pick the one with the clearest recording. Any new questions come in, Art?
No. Apparently we discussed.
Okay, then I think we're done. Thank you for joining.
Thank you all.
And talk to you next Academy about the quota. Bye-bye.